Dad kicked me in the ribs while my kids watched and said, "You're nothing." But my lawyer filmed everything and made sure he faced the consequences. He yelled, "You both don't deserve to breathe the same air as her." He kicked me again while I was on the ground. Mom said, "How dare you waste money on that kid?" Sister grinned. "Should have given it to me like you were supposed to." Uncle nodded. Finally, someone is educating her about family first. My daughter was scared and screaming in the corner while her grandfather beat her mother. Dad pulled my hair and banged my head against the floor, yelling, "Next time you'll listen." He then took the toy from my daughter and dumped it in the trash. I simply stood up slowly, blood streaming down my face, and began their demise. The linoleum felt cool on my cheek. Blood flowed beneath my nose, warm and metallic. Ava's screams rang from behind the kitchen table, where she had forced herself into a corner and clutched her knees. Mason stood paused outside the doorway, the empty toy box still in his small hands, a confused expression on his 8-year-old face. My father's boot had hit my ribs twice. The second kick came after I had already fallen, and I automatically curled to cover my tummy. His dress shoes were made of fine Italian leather and had been polished to a mirror brilliance. My sister Sophia bought them for him for his birthday last month, using money from Dad and Mom's joint account, which I later found. Sophia's initial flat deposit came from the same account where my childhood college fund had suddenly disappeared. "You both don't deserve to breathe the same air as her." Dad's voice echoed off the walls of my own kitchen. My kitchen in my house, where I'd invited them for Sunday dinner after Mom called screaming about how the family was falling apart. Mom stood behind the refrigerator, arms crossed over her cream cardigan, lips pursed in the grimace I'd seen every time I disappointed her. "How dare you waste money on that kid?" Sophia needed the money for salon equipment. The toy had cost $45. Mason had begged for that specific action figure for 3 months. Since seeing it at a friend's birthday party, he's done additional tasks without being asked, practiced his spelling words every night, and even helped Ava clean her bedroom. The joy on his face when I surprised him with it yesterday was well worth the money. Sophia leaned against my counter, studying her manicured nails with disinterest. "Should have given it to me like you were supposed to. I told you last week I needed $300 for the new styling chairs." She hadn't asked for them. She demanded via text message, which arrived while I was attending a budget meeting at work. "Need $300 by Friday, chairs going on sale." "No, please." There's no explanation beyond the chairs. There was no acknowledgement that I had my own bills, children, and life. Uncle Frank appeared in the living room doorway, still holding the beer I had served him 20 minutes earlier. He nodded slowly, his thick neck creased. "Finally, someone teaching her about family first. Your sister's always been too selfish." The irony of Frank calling anyone selfish would have been laughable if my vision hadn't been swimming. If Ava weren't hyperventilating in the corner. If Mason wasn't staring at his grandfather with a look that would probably take years of therapy to understand. Dad's hand tangled in my hair. He yanked up and my scalp screamed in protest. The floor rushed away, then returned forcefully as he slammed my face down. Something in my nose crunched. Fresh blood poured hot and thick. "Next time you'll listen." Ava's screaming intensified. Through clouded vision, I watched Dad march toward her corner. She scrambled backward, but there was nowhere to go. He reached behind her and grabbed the action figure Mason had placed on the chair, still in its package. Mason had wanted to keep it spotless, had carefully set it on his shelf before coming down for dinner. Dad's big fingers tore through the cardboard and plastic. He walked to the trash can and threw the toy deep into the rubbish, mashing it down amid the supper scraps and dirty paper towels. Mason made a sound like a wounded animal. The room tilted as I pushed myself up. My hands left bloody tracks on the white tile. Every breath felt like knives in my ribs. Something was obviously broken or fractured. My face throbbed in tune with my pulse, yet my thinking had become totally clear. I stood slowly, deliberately. Blood poured down my chin and trickled onto my blouse. Mom usually criticized when I looked sloppy, so I meticulously ironed it this morning. Everyone looked at me, waiting for tears, presumably for apologies, for me to promise to be better, to prioritize Sophia, to remember my place in the family hierarchy. I grinned instead. The blood on my teeth looked ugly, as Mom's face turned pale. "Gab." Despite the coppery taste in my mouth, my voice remained steady. "What did you say?" Dad's face reeled, a familiar precursor to another outburst. Sophia laughed sharply and cruelly. "Get out of my house." Oh, now she's got a backbone. A little late for that, don't you think? I took out my phone from my pocket. My hands remained steady. Strange considering the circumstances. I launched the security software, thanked God for facial recognition unlock, and turned the screen toward them. See that camera? The one mounted above the cabinets? It's been recording since you arrived. Every word. Every kick. Everything. There was no more laughter. Dad's color changed from red to grayish. Uncle Frank carefully laid his beer down, his attention drawn to the floor. That's illegal. Mom's voice went up an octave. You can't record people without permission. Actually, in this state, I can. It's my home. One-party consent. I'm the party who consented. I looked this up 6 months ago after the last family dinner when Dad had shoved me into the wall for contradicting him about politics. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave now and you're never coming back. Sophia was grumbling. Oh please, you've made empty threats before. If any of you contact me again and pressing charges, assault and battery, child endangerment for traumatizing my kids. The video is already backed up to the cloud and my lawyer will have a copy by tomorrow morning. Your lawyer. Dad cracked a laugh. You don't have a lawyer. I consulted with one 3 weeks ago. When you showed up to my workplace to borrow money from my handbag while I was in meetings, I realized I needed legal help. Tomorrow, I will formally retain her, and this video will be the first piece of proof she submits. My office's security footage also captured your larceny. By the way, my supervisor was really concerned about family members entering the building under false pretenses. That had occurred. Dad had sweet-talked the receptionist, said he was bringing me lunch, and then rifled through my desk while I was in a conference room. He had snatched $120 and my emergency credit card. I reported the card as stolen, but the $120 had already been deducted. Watching his face comprehend the reality of proof, consequences, and a version of me he didn't recognize filled a dark and hungry feeling in my chest. You're ungrateful, Mom started. Get out before I call the cops and have you arrested. I held out the phone, my finger hovering over 911. They left. Dad's Italian shoes creaked on my floor. Mom grasped her pocketbook as a protection. Sophia's sneer had finally faded, replaced by what could have been genuine concern. Uncle Frank walked away without meeting my gaze. The door closed behind them. I turned on the deadbolt and the chain and ensured that they were both secure. Then I slid down the door and sat on the floor, still clutching the phone in my bleeding hand. Ava ran up to me. Mason followed. They slammed into me, despite the pain in my ribs, and I threw my arms around each of them, holding them while they screamed. I mumbled, "I'm sorry," into Ava's hair. "I'm sorry you saw that. Grandpa hurt you." Mason's voice was small and bewildered. "Why did Grandpa hurt you?" How does one explain generational violence to an 8-year-old? How would you describe being the scapegoat in a family that required someone to blame, steal from, or knock down so that everyone else could feel superior? Because I did not do what he desired. But that will never happen again. I drew back and glanced at both of their faces. Nobody is ever going to hurt Mommy in front of you again. Nobody is ever going to hurt you. We're safe now. Ava gently touched my cheek, her fingertips turning red. You're bleeding a lot. I know, baby. We're going to the hospital. The emergency department doctor, a fatigued woman in her 50s, had plainly witnessed domestic violence before. She inspected my ribs with careful efficiency, took an X-ray of my face, and cleansed the incisions. 2 fractured ribs, a broken nose, and a concussion. She gave me the numbers for a women's shelter, domestic violence resources, and a social worker. It was my father, I replied, feeling fatigued. Not my husband. Her expression did not change. Doesn't matter who hits you, the resources are the same. She was correct. I grabbed all of the papers, carefully folded them, and placed them in the folder I was creating in my head. Evidence, documentation, and proof. Ryan greeted us at the hospital. My spouse had gone out of town for work. Wasn't meant to return until Wednesday. He entered into the exam room, took one glance at my face and turned white. Who? A single word, a low voice, a threatening tone. My family, but I've got it handled. Handled how? I said. The video, the lawyer I'd hired, and the strategy I'd been devising for months. Ever since Dad slapped me at Christmas for serving turkey instead of ham. At the age of 9, Ava's mother informed her that she was becoming overweight and needed to diet. Sophia took and pawned my grandmother's necklace from my jewelry box, stating she needed the money more than I needed sentimental crap. Ryan listened, His jaw tightened with each detail, but he did not interject. When I finished, he nodded once. What do you need from me? Take the kids home, I have calls to make. Christine Walsh was the lawyer's name. She specialized in family law and restraining orders and was highly recommended by a co-worker who had escaped an abusive marriage. I'd met with her once to discuss possibilities when I was worried I was overreacting. Perhaps this was simply how families were. Perhaps I needed to work more to maintain the calm. She answered the second ring, despite the fact that it was nearly midnight. I texted her an hour ago, using Ryan's phone. The doctor's orders meant no screens for me, but this was too crucial. Emergency. Client from consultation 3 weeks ago. Have video evidence of assault. Father attacked me in my home. Tell me everything I did. She listened without interrupting, asking pointed questions about the video quality, whether their faces were visible, and whether the audio was clear. Yes to everything. The camera I had placed was top of the line, disguised in a decorative piece above the cabinets that resembled a plant planter. Nobody had noticed it. Send me the video tonight. I'll review it and file for an emergency restraining order first thing Tuesday morning. We'll also press charges if you want to go that route. I want them to face consequences, real ones, then they will. With video evidence this clear, the DA will likely prosecute. Your father could face serious jail time for assault. Your mother for contributing to the delinquency of a minor since she encouraged it in front of your children. The jargon of the law flooded me. I focused on the key parts: restraining orders, prosecution, and repercussions. Things my family had never experienced before, since I had always backed down. Always apologized. Always attempted to smooth things over. There's something else, I explained. Financial abuse, years of it. Stolen money, forced loans I couldn't refuse, my college fund that disappeared. Can we do anything about that? Possibly. Do you have documentation? I've been collecting it for 8 months. Bank statements showing the withdrawals. Text messages from Sophia demanding money. Emails from Mom explaining why they needed to borrow from me again. My grandmother's, well, that clearly left me the necklace Sophia had pawned. I had the pawn receipt she'd carelessly left in my car after asking me to drive her somewhere. I have everything. Christine's voice warmed with what could have been admiration. Then we'll bury them legally. Voicemails received on Tuesday morning. 17 of them. Dad has demanded that I call him back immediately. Mom cried because I was ripping the family apart. Sophia calls me imaginative names that I will not repeat. Uncle Frank claims Dad just got carried away. I was being dramatic. Family doesn't press charges against family. I erased them all after listening to only a few seconds of each. Christine informed me that they would try to deceive, guilt, and threaten me. She had been right. The restraining orders were filed before 10 a.m. Emergency directives were issued by midday. Hearing is planned for the following week. The police report was submitted simultaneously. An officer arrived to my residence to take my statement and video proof. Officer Jennifer Medina remained expressionless as she watched the tape. When Dad's boot hit my ribs for the second time, something flickered in her eyes. Anger, perhaps. She'd undoubtedly seen worse, but it obviously upset her. Your father's going to be arrested this afternoon, she remarked, closing her laptop. Your mother is unlikely to face criminal charges unless the district attorney is concerned about child endangerment, but the restraining order will keep her away from you and your children. How about my sister? She did not physically assault you, but we will include her in the restraining order. She contributed to the hostile environment by making threats. Sophia smirked, her casual cruelty, the way she'd relished seeing Dad hit me. Yes, she deserved to be included. By the evening, Dad had been charged. The mugshot surfaced on a local news website. Our community was small enough that arrests made headlines, particularly when a presumably respectable businessman was charged with criminal assault. People who knew Dad as a church volunteer, Little League supporter, and prominent community person left comments in amazement. No one knew what happened behind closed doors. Nobody ever does until someone finally opens the doors and allows the light in. The preliminary hearing took place within 80 hours, as required by law. Dad's lawyer was pricey, smooth-talking, who protected wealthy people from the repercussions of their conduct. He argued for a modest bail amount, given Dad's community ties, business duties, and absence of prior criminal history. Diana Torres, the prosecutor assigned to the case, responded with video evidence, the severity of the injuries, and the presence of little children throughout the assault. She claimed Dad was a flight risk due to the potential prison time he faced. The judge watched part of the footage. His demeanor remained unchanged, but something had hardened around his eyes. The bail amount was established at $50,000, which was both high enough to be punitive and low enough to be technically doable. Dad was unable to make bail quickly. A $50,000 bail normally required the full amount in cash or a $5,000 bond from a bail bondsman. However, Dad's liquid assets were small. His funds were locked up in business inventory, equipment, and accounts receivable. Mom declined to take out a home equity loan, either because she saw the gravity of his actions, or simply to preserve her own assets in the event of a divorce. He spent 7 days in county jail until Uncle Frank paid the $6,000 bond. People later claimed that those 7 days transformed him in some way. He appeared older and weakened. Good. The civil lawsuit came next. Christine suggested a colleague who specialized in financial harm and emotional suffering situations. Marcus Aldridge was a shark in a high-end suit who smiled when I gave him my documentation. "Your family has been financially abusing you for over a decade," he explained, laying the files across his conference table. "Based on these records, we're looking at approximately $50,000 in stolen funds, forced loans, and property theft. The emotional anguish damages may be much larger, especially given the abuse and devastation to your children." "I don't care about the money," I responded, not realizing how it sounded. "Well, I do, but that isn't the point. The aim is to make them realize they can't do it anymore, not to me, nor to anyone." Marcus leaned back in his leather chair. "They believe that the best revenge is to live a good life. But the second best payback is taking everything they have and making sure everyone knows why." The lawsuit listed everyone involved, including Dad, Mom, Sophia, and even Uncle Frank, for his role in the attack and history of tolerating abuse. We sued for the recovery of all stolen money, plus interest, the value of the pawn necklace, emotional pain, therapy costs for myself and the children, and medical expenditures. Sophia called me a week after the service. I didn't respond. She left a voicemail that I should not have listened to but did anyway. "You are actually suing us. What about your own family? Several dollars here and there. You are insane. Do you know how much this will cost, Dad? Legal bills alone could bankrupt him. And for what? Because he punished you. You were always overly theatrical. This is why no one likes you. This is why you have never fitted in. We attempt to include you and help you understand how families work, but you are too self-centered to realize it. You are dead to me. Dead to all of us. I hope you are pleased. I've saved the voicemail. Send it to Marcus." He placed it on the evidence pile. The criminal trial took precedence over the civil case. Dad pled not guilty. Naturally, his counsel portrayed an image of a concerned father attempting to punish an out-of-control daughter, a guy pushed to the limit by disrespect and defiance. Despite the restraining orders, the harassment increased in the weeks before the trial. Christine nicknamed them flying monkeys. My family dispatched somebody to do the dirty labor. Distant cousins I hadn't spoken with in years suddenly had my phone number. Old family friends arrived at my office, worried about the misunderstanding that was pulling the family apart. Angela, my second cousin, cornered me at the grocery store, blocking my way out of the cereal section with her cart. "Your father is hurting. You know he has high blood pressure. The stress could kill him." I slid my cart past hers without saying anything. She followed me into the dairy area. "He made a mistake." "Sure. But don't you think you're going too extreme? Pressing charges, a restraining order. He is your father. He changed your diapers, paid for your braces, and provided you with a roof over your head." The milk in my hand was painfully cold. I focused on that sensation to ground myself. "He also kicked me multiple times and smashed my nose in front of my children. We are done here. However, family does not assault one another. Move your cart, or I'll call security." She eventually did, but not before making sure everyone in the dairy area heard her scathing remarks about ungrateful daughters and how young people nowadays lack respect and devotion. Ryan wanted to face her. I stopped him. "She isn't worth it. They'll cast me as the aggressor regardless of what I do." Mom evidently set up a phone tree so the flying monkeys reported back. Women from her book club, her church group, and even my former Girl Scout troop leader called with variations on the same script. I was being selfish. I was damaging Dad's life for a moment of rage. Families forgave. What kind of example did I set for my children by refusing to reconcile? Mrs. Patterson, who taught me how to tie knots and kindle campfires 25 years ago, was very insistent. "Your mother is beside herself. She rarely eats. She's dropped 15 pounds due to stress. Is this what you want? To destroy your parents?" "Mrs. Patterson, has my mother told you what happened?" A pause. "She said there was an argument that got out of hand. He kicked me twice when I was on the floor. Then he grabbed my hair and banged my face onto the floor so hard that my nose broke. My daughter watched the entire thing. She still has nightmares. Longer pause. Well, I'm sure there were circumstances. There is video. It is evidence in a criminal trial. Would you like me to send you the link to the news article? It includes details of his charges. She hung up and did not call again, but others did. The phone tree appeared to be quite extensive. Later on, I began sending everything to voicemail screening. Most texts were variations of the same guilt trip. Some were more threatening. Uncle Frank left a really nice note about how I should drop the accusations, or things would become problematic for me. That one went directly to Officer Medina and my lawyer. Frank received a visit from the police regarding witness intimidation. The menacing calls ceased after that. Work also became complicated. Dad's business partner, a man called Leonard Shaw, whom I met at company picnics as a child, managed to get a direct line to my supervisor. He called, alleging I was making false claims, that the charges were made up, and that I had a history of lying and drug use. All falsehoods, of course, but harmful ones. My boss summoned me in for a meeting, her demeanor perfectly neutral. "I need to ask you about some allegations," she told me. My stomach sank. "What kind of allegations?" "Someone claiming to be a family friend says you've been involved in drug use, and that the assault charges against your father are retaliation for him confronting you about it." The courage was almost impressive. As part of my security clearance for this work, I must submit to drug testing on a quarterly basis. Every test has come out clean. Would you like me to request an immediate screening? Her shoulders dropped significantly. "That won't be necessary." I told her I didn't believe it, but I had to inquire. For the record, I appreciate that. I hesitated before deciding she deserved the full background. "My father is facing felony assault charges because he beat me in front of my children. There's video evidence. His associates are trying to discredit me before trial." She gave a cautious nod. "Do you need additional security? I can have your name removed from the front desk list. Make sure nobody can access you without going through me first." The relief was unexpected. It would be helpful if someone believed in me and supported me unconditionally. "Thank you. I've been where you are. Different circumstances, but I understand what it takes to walk away from family. You're doing the right thing." The trial preparation was exhausting. The prosecutor, a smart woman called Diana Torres, met with me several times to review testimony. What Dad and Mom had spoken, every aspect of the assault, how Ava had reacted, and where Mason had stood. "Defense is going to try to rattle you," Diana said. "They'll imply you provoked him. They'll bring up every argument you ever had with your parents. Try to paint you as the problem child who drove your father to the breaking point. Let them try. I'd been the victim of endless parental disputes. Nothing they could say would be worse than the reality I'd lived. They'll ask about your marriage, whether Ryan ever hit you, whether you're projecting abuse onto your father. The last one hurts because it's so ridiculous. Ryan had never raised his hand to me. He'd never raised his voice during an argument other than to express his dissatisfaction. Ryan's been nothing but supportive. I know, but they'll try to muddy the waters in any way. Just stay calm, stick to the facts, and remember the jury will see the video. That's the most powerful evidence we have." The continuances pushed the trial back 4 months from its start date. Whitmore's strategy was apparent. Exhaust me. I hoped I'd crack under the extended pressure, making me too fatigued to resist. Each delay meant another month of looking over my shoulder and Ava asking when it was going to be over. Another month of being in legal limbo. The prosecution's case revolved around the 6-minute film. Diana played it for me during one of our preparation sessions, forcing me to see myself get beaten. My clinical detachment snapped around minute 4 as Ava's shrieking reached a climax. "I can't watch this again in court," I admitted, wiping away tears. "I can't sit there while strangers watch my daughter go through that." "You won't have to. The judge will allow Ava and Mason's identities to be protected. We'll refer to them as minor child 1 and minor child 2. Their faces will be blurred in the video shown to the jury." Small mercies. Ava was already concerned about strangers knowing what had happened. The thought of her classmates' parents sitting on a jury, witnessing her trauma, had kept me awake several nights. Charles Whitmore, Dad's lawyer, was exactly as I expected. Silver-haired, expensive suit, with practiced expressions of concern and disappointment. He requested 2 continuances, prolonging the trial by 3 months. Christine indicated that it was a deliberate tactic, anticipating that I would become fatigued, run out of money for legal fees, and eventually give up, but the state was prosecuting. I didn't have to pay for Diana or the trial, so I wasn't giving up. The jury selection took 2 days. Whitmore turned down anyone who had daughters, worked in social services, or acknowledged to experiencing family violence. Diana rejected anyone who made excuses for parental discipline, believed that children owed their parents complete obedience, or appeared receptive to tough love tactics. They ended up with 12 folks who were exhausted and slightly angry at having to be there. Perfect, Diana said. Annoyed jurors paid attention because they wanted to get it over with correctly. Opening statements began on a Wednesday. Whitmore spoke first, his voice silky as seasoned whiskey. This is a case about a family disagreement that escalated unfortunately. Gerald Henderson is not a monster. He's a father who lost his temper during a stressful situation. Yes, he should have handled it better. Yes, he regrets his actions. But felony assault, that's prosecutorial overreach for a domestic dispute that should have been handled within the family. Diana's opening was shorter, crisper. The defense wants you to believe this is a family disagreement. I'm going to show you a video of a grown man beating his daughter while she's on the ground. You'll hear his words, see his actions, witness her children's terror. Then you'll decide if that's a disagreement or a crime. I testified on day 3. Walking to the stand was weird, like viewing myself from a distance. Whitmore's cross-examination was exactly as severe as Diana had predicted. Ma'am, isn't it true that you've had a tense relationship with your parents for years? We've had disagreements, arguments, fights, and verbal disagreements. And isn't it true that you've repeatedly refused to assist your sister financially despite her needs? I declined to give her money when I couldn't afford it. Yes. But you could afford a $45 toy for your son. The suggestion hung in the air. The selfish daughter chose her boy above her struggling sister. My children come first. I'm their mother. Even when family needs help. When your sister is trying to start a business. My first responsibility is to my children, not to fund my adult sister's ventures. He tried to make me appear cold, calculating, and ungrateful. He inquired about loans my parents had given me over the years, conveniently ignoring the fact that those loans had funded family gatherings they insisted I host or replaced money they had stolen, and I had to reclaim. Diana's redirection was temporary. Did you provoke your father to kick you that day? No. Did you threaten him? No. Did you do anything that would justify him beating you in front of your children? No. The jurors saw the footage. They witnessed a 58-year-old guy kick his daughter twice while she was down. They overheard him threaten her. I saw him pull her hair and slam her face against the floor. They overheard her 9-year-old kid wailing in the corner. Guilty. Felony assault. Sentenced to 18 months in prison, with the possibility of parole after 12 months if good behavior is maintained. Mom fainted in court. Sophia stormed out, yelling about unfairness. Uncle Frank sat silently, perhaps now realizing that his deeds had repercussions. Dad looked at me as they let him go. I met his gaze. Did not smile. Did not gloat. I just gazed back steadily, like I had never been able to do before. The civil suit proceeded while Dad was in county jail awaiting transfer to state prison. Marcus Aldridge filed his case with surgical precision. Each count was supported by documentation I had spent months gathering. Count 1. Theft and conversion of $50,000 over 12 years. Every coerced debt and borrowed sum is never repaid. Every time they plundered my purse or bank account, I kept detailed documents. This contained the $120 and credit card that Dad stole from my office. Petty theft contributed to a much wider pattern. Count 2. Conversion of inherited property. My grandmother's will specifically gave me her opal jewelry, valued at $3,500. Sophia had removed it from my jewelry box and pawned it for $1,000. I had the pawn receipt, the will, and Sophia's text message gloating about the quick cash she had received. Count 3. Emotional discomfort and deliberate infliction of emotional harm. Years of verbal abuse, manipulation, and scapegoating. More difficult to prove but corroborated by text messages, voicemails, and testimony from friends who witnessed it. Count 4 for assault and violence. This one was uncomplicated due to the felony conviction. Dad was legally responsible for my medical bills and agony and suffering. Count 5, fraud and financial exploitation. My childhood college fund, $25,000 set up by my grandfather, inexplicably transferred to Sophia's account the year she graduated from high school. I discovered documents of the transfer while gathering documentation. Dad had been in charge of that account. Sophia's deposition was especially satisfying. Marcus had a knack for asking innocent-sounding queries that set traps every third syllable. Miss Henderson, How many times would you say your sister gave you money over the past decade? Sophia squirmed in her chair and looked at her lawyer. I don't know. A few times, more than 10, maybe more than 20. I didn't keep count. Marcus slid the document across the table. Bank records, text messages, Venmo transactions. I count 37 separate occasions where your sister transferred money to you. Amounts ranging from $50 to $1,500. Total of $23,640. Did she give you this money willingly? She's my sister. Family helps family. Did you ever pay her back? It was quiet. Miss Henderson, did you ever repay any of the money your sister gave you? I was going to when my business took off, but you never did. Not yet. No. Did you consider these gifts or loans? The trap asked. If she said gifts, she couldn't say she meant to repay them. If she said loans, she admitted to having defaulted on large debt. Gifts, she finally replied. Family gifts. I see. And when your father assaulted your sister, you were present in the room. He didn't assault her. He was disciplining. Miss Henderson, your father was convicted of felony assault. That's a matter of legal record. Were you present when he kicked your sister twice and slammed her head into the floor? Her attorney argued, but the injury proved permanent. Marcus had established her presence and support for violence against me. Mom's deposition made things worse for them. She cried for the majority of it, claiming she couldn't remember things and that she only wanted to keep the family together. Marcus was forceful but professional, guiding her through years of supporting Dad's behavior, her own verbal abuse, and her habit of prioritizing Sophia over me in every disagreement. Mrs. Henderson, when your daughter was hospitalized with a broken nose and cracked ribs, did you visit her? I don't recall. You don't recall whether you visited your daughter in the hospital after your husband put her there? It was a confusing time. Hospital records show no visitors under your name. Your daughter's medical records show that she identified her spouse as her emergency contact, not you. Why was that? Mom wiped her eyes with a tissue. She was always independent. Didn't want my help. Or perhaps she didn't trust you to help her. The deposition transcripts became part of the civil case file. Marcus utilized them to create a story of systemic abuse, financial exploitation, and my family's complete lack of guilt. Uncle Frank attempted to avoid his deposition totally. He cited employment obligations, health concerns, and prior commitments. Marcus received a court order requiring his appearance. Frank arrived 40 minutes late, visibly drunk and aggressive. This is all he announced before anyone asked the question. Family business should stay in the family. This girl is tearing apart 3 generations over some drama. His lawyer was ready to hide beneath the table. Marcus merely smiled and began recording. By the time Frank departed 2 hours later, he'd acknowledged to seeing Dad slap me at least 5 times before, confirmed that he'd never intervened, and claimed unequivocally that he believed I needed discipline because I was disrespectful and selfish. Perfect, Marcus exclaimed when Roger stumbled out. He just handed us evidence of a pattern of abuse and willing witnesses who did nothing to stop it. The settlement negotiations began 3 weeks before the civil trial was scheduled. Dad's lawyer, a different one than Whitmore, someone who specialized in civil litigation, made the first offer, $20,000, which Marcus laughed at. Counteroffer, $250,000 plus a recorded apology admitting to abuse. My clients refuse to apologize for anything. Then we will see them in court. With a criminal conviction, deposition transcripts, and 12 years of proven financial abuse, I'm convinced a jury will give considerably more than my request. The lawyer paled, knowing Marcus was correct. Civil juries in our county tended to favor abuse victims, especially when children were involved. Second offer, $45,000, no apology. Marcus, $200,000. Take the apology off the table because your clients clearly lack integrity. Third offer, $60,000. Marcus, we've finished negotiating. See you in court. He walked out of the mediation, and I followed, believing his plan, despite the fact that $60,000 was the most money I'd ever seen in one place. They'll come back, he promised me in the parking lot. They can't risk a jury trial. The exposure alone would ruin your father's reputation. Roger's bail is $6,000. He will not pay real money for a lengthy trial. Their support system is cracking. He was correct, and the final offer came the next day. $75,000 paid in full within 30 days, with all parties signing NDAs forbidding any discussion of the case or settlement conditions. No NDA, I told Marcus. I won't be silenced about what they did. He worked it out. They really needed the NDA. Mom, in particular, had been ostracized from her social circles, her book club, and even her church group. When the details of the assault became public, women who had been her friends for decades stopped returning calls. An NDA would allow her to claim that everything was exaggerated and that we had settled quietly because I had been unreasonable. The settlement was reached on a Thursday afternoon in a conference room that reeked of stale coffee and desperation. Marcus insisted on dropping the NDA requirement or writing a trial in which even more humiliating details would be revealed during testimony. Dad, who was still in prison, was represented by his lawyer. Mom sat straight in her chair, refusing to look at me. Natalie scowled daggers the entire time. I signed the paperwork with steady hands. $75,000 was paid within 30 days. They had to liquidate virtually everything to make it happen. Dad's business was being sold to his former partner, Leonard Shaw, for a fraction of its value. Mom had eventually agreed to a home equity loan, and Natalie had evidently borrowed from many credit cards. Their eagerness to avoid litigation and public testimony had cost them dearly. "This isn't over," Natalie whispered as we walked away. "You think you've won, but you've just made enemies for life." "I've had enemies my whole life," I said quietly. "They were just disguised as family. At least now I know the truth." The money arrived in my account 28 days later, 2 days before the deadline, and I immediately paid off our mortgage, which was worth $40,000. The freedom of owning our home outright, of knowing my family couldn't use housing insecurity against me, was worth more than any amount of money. The second payment went to therapy bills I'd accumulated for myself and the kids, totaling nearly $15,000 for intensive treatment, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, and family counseling sessions. The third portion went into college funds for Ava and Mason, $20,000 split between them, unlike the fund my grandfather had set up for me. The remainder paid for tuition for me to finally finish my degree, which I dropped out of when the family needed me to work and contribute money to Natalie's education instead. I enrolled for the spring semester, 10 years after my last classroom experience. Sophia's salon failed 6 months later. Without regular cash infusions from me, and without Mom and Dad's support now that their own finances were in shambles, she couldn't make rent. The business loan she'd taken out, which she'd pressed me to co-sign for years ago but I'd finally refused, came due. She'd been making minimum payments, barely surviving. The home where I grew up, where Dad had built his reputation as a family man and pillar of the community, sold for less than market value, and most of her equipment was repossessed. She moved back in with Mom, who had been forced to sell the house to pay the settlement and was now living in a 2-bedroom apartment across town. After the settlement, Uncle Frank stopped taking Dad's calls. He only tolerated abuse when it didn't cost him anything. Life moved on. Ava began therapy and gradually began sleeping through the night without nightmares. Mason stopped flinching when men raised their voices. Ryan and I renewed our vows in a small ceremony with only our friends, the family we'd chosen rather than the one we'd been born into, and I got a promotion at work. It turns out that when you're not constantly stressed about managing abusive family members, fielding calls, demanding money, or recovering from the most recent dramatic confrontation, you actually have energy to focus on your career. My supervisor commented, "I appear different recently, more confident, more present." "I set some boundaries," I informed her. It made a difference, most likely the understatement of the decade. After 14 months, Dad was released and he was living with Mom in her apartment, working part-time at a warehouse because his business had failed. Because of his felony conviction, he was barred from most professional opportunities, and he never contacted me. The restraining order was now permanent, and I believe he realized I meant what I said. Sophia attempted to contact him once, 3 years after everything had happened, through a letter rather than a phone call or email, which would have violated the restraining order, and she was finally wise enough to be cautious. The letter was filled with half apologies and justifications. I never expected it to go this far. I never wanted Dad to go to jail. I was just supporting him because that's what families do. Maybe we both made mistakes. Maybe we could try to repair this relationship if you're willing to forgive. I burned the letter in the fireplace. Ryan watched without comment, then handed me a glass of wine. "Do you feel better?" he asked. "We're getting there. Some could claim I went too far. That family deserves more opportunities, grace and forgiveness. Those folks have not been kicked in the ribs by their father while their children were watching. Those folks have not spent decades as an emotional and financial punching bag for those who were supposed to love and protect them. I don't regret the lawsuits, the charges, the restraining orders. I don't regret pursuing every legal option available to me. They harmed me for years, stole from me, used me, and eventually escalated to physical violence in front of my children. The downfall I promised myself that night, standing slowly with blood running down my face, I delivered methodically, legally, and completely. Ava occasionally asks if she'll ever see her grandparents again, and I tell her the truth. Probably not. She appears relieved rather than sad. Mason scarcely remembers them now, which may be for the best. We've constructed a new life, lighter, quieter, and filled with people who treat us with respect and care. Ryan's parents, who are horrified by what my family did, go out of their way to show my kids what healthy grandparenting looks like. I still have nightmares about that day, the impact of Dad's boot, the sound of my nose breaking, Ava screams, but they are less frequent now, fading like old scars. Last week, I bought Mason a new action figure. The identical one Dad threw away, but we had to get it online because it is no longer available in stores. Mason looked at it for a long time before gently removing it from the package. "Can I play with it?" he asked. "Of course. That is what toys are for," he said, smiling. Ryan sat beside me, his hand resting on mine, and he began telling elaborate stories about space battles and heroic rescues. Ava joined in, adding her own characters to the story. I watched them play, these resilient little humans who'd witnessed something no child should see and were somehow finding their way back to joy and safety. "You did good," he replied gently, going away, protecting them and carrying through. A lot of people couldn't do that. Maybe he was correct. Or perhaps I just reached a point where the agony of staying was greater than the anguish of leaving. Where protecting my children was more important than preserving a mask of family harmony. Regardless, I was free. They were free. And if it made me the villain in my family's story, the ungrateful daughter, the vindictive sister, the destroyer of family peace, I would joyfully wear that name. It's better to be the villain in someone else's story than the victim in your own.